Chapter 8 Lincoln's Blue Period Part 1 Lisa's multiple tests have left Lincoln extremely tired. Luckily, none of them had been terribly painful, and they were mostly non-invasive. The worst part had been taking the blood samples, but even that wasn't as bad as he thought it would be. Still, seeing so many blood in a recipient had left him quite nervous. As soon as she was done doing her initial examinations, Lisa hurriedly kicked Lincoln out of her room so she could get to work. He assumed he couldn't really help her, so he didn't complain and went back to his own room. As soon as he sat on his bed, he realized he was feeling really tired. His arms felt like they were made out of lead, so heavy that he could barely lift them, and he thought that his joints could use some WD-40. Lisa had warned him that he might feel a little numb after the blood extraction, so maybe that was it. Or maybe it was the fact that he had one of the worst days of his life. Whatever it was, he just laid on his bed over his blankets, putting his head on his pillow and closed his eyes. He breathed in and out a couple times, and as soon as he fell asleep, finally having deserved rest and a dreamless nap. Even if it was just a nap, Lincoln slept through it like he was a bear in the winter time. He couldn't fully remember it when he had woken up a couple hours later, but he was slightly aware that during the West he had been visited by some of his sisters. He seemed to remember seeing Lenny, that Lori had kicked Lola out of his room when the younger one tried to wake him up, and even at some point he opened his eyes only to find Lynn, kneeling on the floor next to his bed, looking at him with her eyes full of tears. He was so tired that the only thing he could do was just grab her hand before falling asleep again. He didn't wake up for a couple hours. Those little accidents that had interrupted his sleep were now strange memories that had faded away with every second he was awake. The first thing he noticed was that he was alone in his room, which seemed odd since he had the feeling that he had been with someone else. The second thing he noticed was that someone had taken time to delicately remove his shoes from him, change his jeans from the bottom part of his pajamas and tuck him in under his blankets. He initially thought that it might have been his mother, but after seeing his jeans on the floor and not tidily folded in a chair, he knew it had been one of his sisters. A quick glance at the clock told him that it was 8:15. He frowned, confused. They always had dinner at 8 o'clock. Why didn't they wake him up? He quickly dressed up and stepped out of his room. He went downstairs and got to the dining room where his 5 older sisters and his parents were having dinner. It was one thing to know that he was going to die, that his days were numbered. It was terrible. But seeing it reflected upon his sisters' and parents' faces was even worse. They all had their heads down, seemingly more worried about staring at the food rather than eating it. His parents seemed to be the only ones who had touched their plates. His sisters were all holding the forks in their hands, absently moving their food. He noticed that Lynn was practically stabbing her beef stew over and over again, leaving it in such small pieces that one could just drink it as a soup. It didn't go unnoticed by him, the fact that Luann was wearing her mime attire, that the black makeup on her eyes were all messed up, going down her cheeks, painting a few tear tracks. In a house full of girls where makeup was such a sacred thing, something like that could never go unnoticed. But no one seemed to care. They were all just staring at their dinner. It was a devastating picture. His experience with the grown-up table wasn't the best. He considered it extremely boring, but if there was something that he'd learned, it was that he always had something to talk about. Perhaps it was mundane things like a math test or an anecdote from their parents' job, but the grown-ups always had something they could talk about. Seeing them in such silence, with everyone focused in their own misery, in their own thoughts, made him feel even worse, if that was even possible. He knew he couldn't sneak to the kitchen, so he decided to step closer and wait for someone to notice him. He didn't really feel like just appearing out of nowhere and saying hi. Luckily, his presence was acknowledged almost immediately. Lenny was looking down at her food. She decided to drink a little to soothe her sore throat, and when she raised her glass, she saw Lincoln on the corner of her eyes. She turned around, and for a single second, Lincoln saw such a depressed face that could be photoshopped into Picasso's Guernica, and it wouldn't seem to be out of place. If it wasn't for the fact that he felt a stab in his heart when he saw her like that, he would have thought that he had imagined it. Because, suddenly, Lenny's face was the same as always, radiating happiness. "Hi, Lincoln, you're awake," she said with a smile, while she took what seemed to be her first bite at her food. Lori and Luna looked up and left their forks on the table. They tried to relax their faces, but they weren't even close to show themselves as happy and as Lenny was. Lynn wiped her eyes with her sleeve before slowly turning around. Her eyes started to nervously alternate between Lincoln and the floor. Luann stayed the same. His parents did react. They immediately looked up to their son, and Rita got up from her chair and walked right to him. "Lincoln, honey," she said as she hugged him like she hadn't seen him in a month. "How are you? How do you feel?" "I'm great, thanks," he said, while she put a hand on his forehead to make sure he didn't have a fever. "I fell asleep in my room. We didn't want you to wake up. You seemed really tired." "It's okay. Don't worry, Dad," Lincoln told him, slowly slipping away from his mother's grip. "Well, I guess I'll just go to my table." He turned around, prepared to head down to the kitchen where his younger sisters were already eating, but his mother put a hand on his shoulder. "Honey, your father and I have been talking. You can eat at the grown-up table anytime you want," she said as her lips started to tremble. "And if you don't like the food we have here, you can take food from the kiddie table. You can have dessert too," his dad told him. "And if you want seconds, just tell me and I'll cook you whatever you want." Lincoln felt incredibly guilty. Everyone at the grown-up table was looking at him, waiting for him to say something. They were surely expecting him to say that he'd love to run away from the chaos at the kiddies' table, hang out with them while still being able to enjoy chicken nuggets, ice cream, and even have seconds. And that was the most tempting offer. Never in his 11 years he went to sleep being hungry. They were never lacking food, but sometimes he did like he could use some seconds, just so he could go to sleep feeling completely full. They were now offering him all the treats he'd always wished to have, but they weren't giving him these treats as a reward for his good behavior or for acing his tests. They were consenting him because he was sick. They were treating him differently because he would be gone too soon. His older sister seemed okay with the new arrangement. Lynn was even starting to clear the table in the spot next to her, making room for him. He understood that they would want to have as much time with him as possible, and they'd like to consent him. He truly understood them, but he wasn't comfortable with the idea of accepting a differential treatment because of his condition. He didn't want to take advantage of his disease just so he could have some treats. What kind of monster would do that? Besides, no matter how tempting the idea of having dessert in the grown-up table was, the last thing he ever wanted was to make his little sisters suspicious. "Thank you, really, but I think I'm going to stay at the kids' table," he softly said. His parents sighed and slowly nodded, as if they knew he was going to say that. His sisters looked down at their plates again, and Lynn dropped her knife, not worried about the sound it made as it hit the floor. She clenched her fist and frowned, looking straight at her food. "I mean, it's not that I don't want to be with you guys, but, you know, I don't want the girls to, well, it's okay, sweetie," his mother assured him. "You can eat wherever you want, son. If you change your mind, or if someday you want to eat here, the door is open." "Thanks, Dad," I guess I'll go get some dinner. Giving the table one last smile, only returned by Lenny, he went to the kitchen. In the kiddies' table, oh surprise, his younger sisters were fighting. Lucy seemed to be arguing with Lisa about how the vegetables were sentient. The little genius was too busy reading some annotations on her notebook while absently eating her broccoli. That was only making the goth girl angrier. Lola and Lena were fighting over the mayonnaise, both of them arguing that they had touched it first. They were basically in a tug-of-war, a pretty violent discussion that seemed to be only about to escalate into a fistfight. The only one having a peaceful dinner was Lily, who was pretending that her spoon was a little plain all by herself. Lincoln didn't have the energy to intervene in any fight. He just sat on his chair, but his presence wasn't unseen. "Lincoln, tell Lena to let me have my mayonnaise!" Lola hurriedly said. "No, tell her to drop it! I grabbed it first! You wish! Let it go!" Rolling his eyes, Lincoln took the mayonnaise from them. "Hey!" They both complained at the same time. After getting some on his plate, he took his sisters and put the same amount on both plates. In less than 10 seconds, he gave them back their dinner, all ready so that they could go on with the night. That was usually the part when the twins would settle down and say, "Thanks, Lincoln," at the same time with a smile. But that wasn't quite the case. They seemed oblivious about their food being handed back to them. They kept glaring at each other. Guys, you both have your mayonnaise. You can stop hating each other," Lincoln said confusedly. "You always do the same," Lola complained, ignoring her brother. "You always want to be right about everything." "That's not true. You're the one who always wants to do everything your way." "Gosh, you always ruin everything!" "Okay, that's enough," Lincoln intervened, separating the twins' chairs and standing in the middle. "This is clearly not a mayonnaise situation. What's going on?" The two girls crossed their arms and turned around, facing away from each other. None of them wanted to answer him. Lincoln was about to say something when, through the door that led to the dining room, he heard a thud against the table and the sound of a chair being violently moved. Lynn, where do you think you're going?" he heard his father say. "My room!" Lynn really said, completely forgetting her manners. "Dinner's not over yet," her mother said. "I don't care! I'm not hungry!" "Come on, sis," Luna started to say. "I said I'm not hungry!" The house remained silent after that, with the only sound being Lynn's steps as she climbed up the stairs. "That's what's going on," Lucy said, answering Lincoln's question. "They've all been acting weird." "Looking at Lincoln," said Lola. "Yeah," Lena agreed. "Today, Lynn was practicing with her punching bag in the backyard, and when I asked her if she wanted to make some mud piles with me, she ignored me, and then she yelled at me to leave her alone. And when I went to your room to see if you wanted to be in a tea party, Lori kicked me out and treated me like I was doing something bad." Luna locked me and herself in the garage all day, playing her guitar," Lucy said. "I wanted to ask her for a rhyme for a poem, but she didn't let me in." "Yeah, and Luann's sad mime routine was way over the top," said Lola. "I like it," Lucy said. "I've always found mimes fascinating creatures, little souls trapped in a body incapable of communication, with their imagination as their only tool for survival." "You do know it's a simple act, don't you?" Lisa asked her. Why are they acting so weird?" After Lena's question, they all looked at Lincoln. He was hoping that they couldn't see the sweat coming down his forehead. He needed an explanation, stat, and it better be a good one. It was clear for him that Lucy at least suspected something. He still remembered when she had asked him if it was true that he was okay. Being forced to lie to her and still hurt him, especially after promising her that he was going to be okay. But he couldn't tell the truth yet. He wasn't ready. "Lincoln, do you know something? Do you know why they're acting like this?" Lucy asked him, confirming his worst fears. She was still suspicious. Well," he started, adjusting the neck of his polo t-shirt, which seemed to be squeezing him. It's my fault, Lisa said, continuing to eat normally. Your fault? What did you do? Lola asked, raising an eyebrow. Recently, I communicated to them that I could no longer be their tutor, since I decided to dedicate my full time in a new scientific investigation that could change the history of mankind and our family, she added, looking up to the glance at Link for a second. We are currently approaching the end of a new school term, and they are aware that the probabilities of them getting an F on their exams has potentially increased now that they're on their own. The prospect of having to take summer classes has them both nervous and worried. Wait a minute, Lola exclaimed. You won't help me with my homework? No. You won't help me with my math? Lucy calmly asked. No. Sigh. While the three girls started to argue, thinking about how they would manage to do all their homework without Lisa's help, the little genius looked up at her brother. Lincoln was also glancing at her. He didn't know if he should be grateful for bailing him out, or if he should feel guilty for exposing Lisa to the rest of his sisters. She simply nodded and got back to her notes. She was really good at ignoring her sisters. Being left alone, Lincoln started to eat his dinner, immersed in the chaos. He started to think about how much he would miss those dinners. When his alarm clock woke him up at 6:30 in the morning, Lincoln lazily turned it off and just sat on his bed. Looking at the small fluorescent letters in the screen, he saw it was Wednesday. Still, a little sleepy, he started to dress up for school. He had to hurry if he wanted to make it to the bathroom before his sisters. However, as he was combing his hair, he noticed his math books were on his desk. He stopped for a second, wondering why they were there. He had math on Tuesdays. They should be in his backpack. And then his brain finally woke up and he remembered it all. He didn't go to school the day before, neither on Monday, because he had only come back to the house the day before. He had been in the hospital, and he talked it over with his parents, and they decided that he wouldn't be attending school anymore since he didn't feel like he could do it, because he was going to die. He let himself fall down over his bed, sitting against the wall. He was going to die. It was true. It hadn't been a nightmare. He stared at the reflection in the mirror, at his very own face, and he realized he was very expressive. The image before him was the perfect canon, the most accurate representation of a resignated face. It was the face of a man who had his hope taken from him. But there were also some things the mirror couldn't catch. The crystal couldn't reflect the horrible sensation he was feeling in his heart. The most important muscle was completely numb, experiencing a tickling sensation. That really scared him. Even though he knew it was something purely emotional, the tickling had started only when he remembered he was going to die. Part of him, he was scared that it might be a symptom of his heart starting to fail. He started to be agitated. He didn't want to die. He opened his room and went out to the hall, feeling the urgent need to see at least one of his sisters. It was still too early, but he could hear the movement inside his sister's room, and he imagined that they would be changing and getting ready. Without even thinking about it, he went straight to Lucy's and Lynn's room. He didn't even want to wake up Lily, and it was still too early to end up in the middle of a fight between Lola and Lena. He opened the door of his closet closest sisters, in terms of age, and poked his head inside the room. Hey guys, are you awake? He heard a small scream and right away a pillow flew right into his face. Being just a pillow, it didn't hurt him, but the surprise and the fact that he saw an object flying to his face made him lose balance, and he fell on the floor. Oh my God, Lincoln! Even before he could assimilate the soft impact, Lynn was already kneeling beside him, grabbing the pillow and throwing it away from him. She looked at him with worry in her eyes, like she had accidentally shot him in the shoulder with a gun. She looked absolutely terrified. Just a second later, he heard what seemed like a stampede coming down the hall. He looked up and saw Luann, Luna, Lenny, and Lori, all with their hairs being half-made and the mascaras all messed up. Lynn's scream seemed to have interrupted them in whatever they were doing, and they went running to see him. What happened? Is everything okay? Call an ambulance! I'm already on it! Lincoln was used to the fact that his sisters loved him a lot and would be overprotective with him. He would never openly admit it, but he truly loved that they cared for him that much. It made him feel loved. But seeing them like that, calling an ambulance just because they found him on the floor, it only served to make him feel miserable. Lincoln, are you okay, bro? Luna asked, grabbing one of his hands and squeezing it with all her strength. She looked like she was about to cry. By then, the twins and Lisa had gathered around to see what was all the commotion. I'm alright, don't worry. You don't need to call an ambulance, he assured them, standing up. His older sister sighed, relieved. Lori canceled the call, and they all seemed to relax a bit. But why were you on the floor? Lenny asked, clearly confused. Lynn threw a pillow at him, Lucy said, seemingly materializing out of thin air behind all their sisters. The only ones scared were Lincoln and the twins. The rest of the girls shot daggers with their eyes at Lynn. Lincoln also turned to see his sister, and he was only then aware of the fact that she was just wearing her shorts and her training bra. She had her t-shirt in her hand. Now that the dust had settled, she started to feel a little embarrassed and quickly crossed her arms over her chest, just as her face started to blush. I was changing and Lincoln just appeared out of nowhere. I got scared and over crying out loud, Lori exclaimed, glaring at Lynn with her arms akimbo. Are you literally saying that you got nerves because Lincoln walked into your dressing up? Come on, it's not Hugh, it's just Lincoln. Dudes, we're 11 kids bottled up inside a small house. There's no such thing as privacy, Luna told him, also mad, but trying to palliate Lori's tone. Lincoln has walked into my room at the wrong moments a lot of times, and we've all seen more than his undies. Those are awkward moments, but we're family. You can't let that just get to you because your brother saw you with your bra. Besides, Lincoln's not that age yet, Lenny added, covering Lincoln's eyes so he couldn't listen to her. By then, Lincoln was already completely blushed. On the good side, his mind was now fully distracted from his depressive thoughts and his fatal destiny. Look, I'm sorry, okay? Lynn said, quickly putting on her t-shirt. Of course I didn't mean it, this guy... How care, Lori interrupted her. You know how things are now. You can't throw stuff at Lincoln. Did you already forget what happened the last time you hit him? Snapped a very angry Luann, speaking for the first time since Lincoln had returned home. The rest of the siblings gasped and turned to look at Luann, not believing what they had heard. Some put their hands over their mouths, while others, like Lincoln, simply stayed there, flabbergasted. Lynn, meanwhile, took a step back like the words had hit her. Certainly, she looked as if she was in physical pain after hearing that. She had her mouth half open and a hand on her chest. Her gaze went from Luann to Lincoln. He looked at her too. He wanted to say something. He wanted to tell her that it wasn't true, that she shouldn't listen to Luann's words, her terrible jokes. He wanted to say a lot of things, but he didn't find the right words. And maybe it was that doubt that Lynn saw in his eyes. Maybe that's why she shedded tears. Taking advantage of the fact that they were right next to the door, she grabbed her backpack and her bike helmet. Her siblings tried to stop her, but she passed through them like an arrow, going downstairs at full speed. Lori went to try and get her, but she didn't even get close to her before Lynn stepped out of the house, grabbed her bike, and started to pedal away. Dude, what the heck? Said Luna, not so gently, shoving Luann's shoulder. How could you say that? What's the matter with you? Luann, who was fully dressed as a mime except for her makeup, made a gesture of zipping her mouth shut and walked away to her room. Luna started yelling at her and followed her to her bedroom. Lenny went along, trying to calm them down. Lincoln was left with his younger sisters, feeling miserable. All this because of a pillow? Lola asked aloud. Man, high school exams must be really tough, Lena said. While his younger sisters went back to being a little confused, to their rooms, Lincoln decided to go downstairs. When he reached the living room, he saw Lori sitting on the couch with her head looking at the ceiling and a hand over her face. Clearly, this wasn't the morning she had been expecting, not the morning that she wanted. And Lincoln couldn't avoid thinking that it was maybe his fault. "Lori?" he called her, slowly getting closer. His sister sighed, sat more comfortably. "Lori, I'm sorry, this is all my fault. I didn't—" "Lincoln, stop. It wasn't your fault. It's not Lynn's either. It's our fault. We're all too susceptible. I should have kept it cool, handled the situation better. But as soon as I heard your name, I just panicked." Lincoln sat beside her and hugged her. At first she was taken by surprise. It wasn't common for him to take the initiative in a demonstration of caring like that, but she immediately embraced him. I just needed to be with someone," Lincoln told her. "Why? What happened, Lincoln?" Tightened his grip. "Nothing," he lied, not wanting to worry his sister. I just wanted to be with you guys." Lori broke away from the embrace just long enough to stare at her little brother's eyes. "Listen, twerp," she affectionately told him. "Remember rule number 1 of the house? Thou shalt not enter Lori's room, literally never," he recited. "Well, that rule no longer applies to you. You hear me? If you need help with something, just tell me. If you want to come in and ask me to take you to the mall, you can do it. If you have a nightmare in the middle of the night and you want me to sleep with you, go ahead and tell me. And if you only want a hug, you can wake me up and I'll give you as many as you want." By the time she finished, Lori was about to cry. Lincoln had seen too many tears in such a short morning. He put his hand on Lori's left cheek and very carefully wiped away a tear from her eye with his thumb. She smiled at the gesture and put her hand over his, closing her eyes and enjoying the warmth of his touch. "Kids, is everything okay?" Lincoln turned around, totally confused after finding his mom standing in the kitchen, wearing her apron. "Mom, shouldn't you be heading to work? I spoke with Feinstein. I'm taking my vacations now, so you don't have to stay at home alone in the mornings while your sisters go to school." "Oh, I see. Thanks, Mom. Don't mention it. You can go back to sleep if you want. I can wake you up by 10. "No, it's fine," he said, standing up. "I'll go to my room. I need to get ready for something." "What are you up to?" Lori asked. Lincoln bit his lower lip and looked down, just by thinking about what he intended to do in the afternoon. After the bell indicated the end of classes, the 5th grade students picked up their stuff and abandoned their classrooms. They went straight to their lockers, grabbed their books, and they left the building with their friends, chatting and laughing. That's what most students did, but not Ronnie Ann. She was walking alone with her skateboard in her hand and her head down. She wasn't your average 11-year-old girl. She loved video games, skateboarding, and wearing baggy clothes. She always said what was on her mind. She's a pretty straightforward girl, and she didn't back off from anything. Unfortunately, her tomboy reputation didn't help her make friends. In her old school, she had this small group of friends she could hang out with. But now, she had no one to talk to. It's not like they hated her. Everyone seemed to be polite with her. But she didn't belong to any group. She had no one to talk to after school, no one to laugh with during lunch and recess. There was only one person she could hang out with, whom she could be herself and have some incredible moments. Even if they couldn't be seen together by the rest of the school, or even by their families. They would often spend a night texting, and they hanged out once a week or so. But right now, that person wasn't. "Hey, Ronnie Ann!" She stopped dead in her tracks and looked up. Standing just a few feet away from her was none other than Lincoln Loud. Not only that, but he was also wearing a different attire than his usual. He had an orange shirt with its long sleeves folded up. He was wearing khakis, and he also had some nice brown shoes. His hair was sparkling and perfectly combed, while still managing to keep his cowlick. Ronnie Ann couldn't keep a smile from appearing on her face as she remembered the last time she saw him dressed up like that. It was the same clothes he wore in that double date they had in John Juan's. He looked just like when he shared their first kiss. It didn't matter that he had stolen a kiss from her before that one, because it was in Juan's when she first kissed him back. For all it had meant to her, as far as she was concerned, that was her first kiss. So far, it was her last kiss, too. "Hey, Lincoln," she greeted him. She was so happy seeing him after 3 days without him in school that she had wanted to have a smile from ear to ear, but she had to keep it cool. "So how's it going?" he asked nervously, swinging on his feet. "Not bad. You know you like always. How about you?" "I'm good." They didn't say anything else for a few seconds, looking anywhere else but each other. She hated awkward silences. "Nice khakis," she chuckled, causing Lincoln's cheeks to gain a new shade of pink. "Thanks. But what gives with the hair?" "Well, remember how my sisters go nuts when they know I'm going out to see you? Well, today I found that they got that from my mom." "You came here to see me?" she asked, blushing too. He was about to say something, but they were interrupted by a shout. "Hey, Lincoln!" After turning around, they saw that Liam, Rusty, Zach, and a few other guys from their class were watching them from about 20 meters away. "Skipped school all week and you don't even come to say hi to your friends?" Liam said from the distance. "Ooh, he's busy talking with Ronnie Ann," Rusty said, and they all started to laugh. Ronnie Ann sighed. She dropped her skate on the ground and prepared her fist. "I promise this won't hurt you too much," she whispered before raising her voice so they could hear her. "Very funny, lame-o, but I won't be falling for the same trick twice." She raised her fist as if to hit him, but Lincoln took one step forward and gently grabbed her by the wrist. Surprised by this, she put her hand down. "Lincoln, what are you doing?" she asked, looking flustered to the boys who were starting to sing a silly love song. "Don't you see they'll be teasing you if they see you with me?" Lincoln smiled at her. "I don't care if you don't care." Ronnie Ann stared at him with her mouth open. Lincoln always hated when his friends teased him because of her. That was why they would only hang out at the arcades or in the cinema, hidden away from those guys. That's something she always found weird about Lincoln. He wasn't ashamed of people making fun of him for his comics, and he had enough self-esteem to go to a convention with a costume that had his underwear on the outside. But only after the slightest teasing about him and Ronnie M being an item, he would blush and get on the defensive. It was something new to see him so calm about it, so decided, and she liked him for being like that. She also liked the fact that he was still holding her hand. "I'm okay with it. I can kick their butts any day of the week, but are you sure you're okay with it? I can punch you now and talk with you later." As tempting as a blow to my face may seem, my doctor told me to avoid things like that. Her smile quickly faded, and she looked down. Of course, she didn't forget that Lincoln had been in the hospital. "Hey, don't worry," he told her, sensing her sadness. He then blushed again and cleared his throat. "Look, I'd like to. I mean, if you want. I thought you might be interested in. Well, of course, if you don't have any plans." She looked up, raising an eyebrow. "Just say it, lame-o," she encouraged him, smiling. Lincoln stammered for a few more seconds before he sighed. He then calmly looked her in the eye, but she couldn't take him seriously with how red his face was. Do you want to go and have some lunch with me?" She knew that now Lincoln couldn't take her seriously neither, not if her face was as blush as she thought it was. "Lunch? Like right now?" Lincoln looked to the side, trying to ignore the teasing he was still receiving from his classmates. Well, if you don't want to, maybe we could calm down, lame-o," she told him, while she was trying to calm herself down. "I'd like to have lunch with you, but I didn't bring any money. You can stop by my house so I can take some cash from Bobby. Oh, don't worry. My mom gave me enough money. I can pay for both of our meals, he quickly assured her. Ronnie and Anne couldn't help but chuckle at those words. You know, if I didn't know you any better, I'd say you'd be asking me out. She started to laugh, waiting for Lincoln to join her, but he was too busy looking elsewhere, trying to hide how blushed he was. What's the matter, Romeo? You forgot your flowers? His classmates shouted. Ronnie Ann looked at Lincoln's friends that were now laughing uncontrollably. Taking advantage of their distraction, she grabbed an empty plastic bottle from the trash and threw it at them with all her strength. Poor Liam didn't even see it coming until it hit him right in the forehead. They all stopped laughing. Check this out! This one's full! Ronnie Ann loudly said, grabbing another bottle. $10 says I can knock down the one with the orange hair. Since most of the guys had orange hair, they all ran away, leaving Lincoln and Ronnie Ann alone. I'm pretty sure there were less violent ways of getting rid of them, Lincoln commented with a head shake, but smiling a little bit. And that's why people keep messing with you. Are you telling me I should throw a bottle to your head? He playfully asked. You could try, she answered, smiling back, and then I would pulverize you. So, any ideas about where to go, lame-o? Just tell me you're not going to take me to John Juan's. What? No, I was actually thinking about going to the Burpin Burger, Lincoln excitedly said. Cool. We can go to the one in the mall so we can then hit the arcades. Exactly. Shall we go? Lead the way, lame-o, she said, softly bumping him in the shoulder. And then the teacher said, but if the dog ate your homework, why'd you bury the day of your math quiz? Ronnie Ann said, finishing the anecdote. Lincoln, who was drinking his soda, spat it all out in laughter, with some of it coming out of his nose. Ronnie Ann also bursted out laughing after seeing him like that. People passed by trying to ignore the two kids that, sitting on the edge of the fountain with their Burpenberger bags, were hysterically laughing. Lincoln was wiping his face with a napkin, and even though his nostrils were burning for the liquid that had gone through them, he couldn't stop laughing. Oh man, she caught him good, he managed to say after catching his breath. Dang it, why the best things happen in school only when I'm not here? That was actually the only funny thing that's happened these last few days. The rest was pretty much the usual stuff, she said while chewing her double cheeseburger. Even so, I kind of miss being with you. I mean, hang out with you guys. She totally realized what he almost said, but she decided to cut him some slack. She took some of the bread from the burger and smashed it into smaller pieces. Then she threw it into the fountain, watching the little fishes gathering around to eat the crumbs. I didn't know you liked fish, Lincoln said, noticing his friend's smile. I love animals, she admitted. She looked up and found him smiling. Wait, don't you believe me? Oh, no, I do believe you. It's just I like this. You know, getting to know you more. About your caring side. Ronnie Ann grabbed as many fries as she could and stuffed them in her mouth so she could have an excuse to not say anything. Since when was Lincoln so confident? They would hang out pretty often, and they always had fun, shared some good laughs, and enjoyed their moments together. But he never behaved like this. Inviting her to Burpenberger, paying for her order, and now telling her she had a caring side? There was something different about him, but she didn't know what it was. He seemed to be a little distracted, like his mind was divided between the conversation he had and something else. He looked a little nervous, like his shoulders abnormally tense. His eyes always seemed to be a little tired, and living with 10 sisters, it would be a miracle if he wasn't. But now, it looked like he hadn't had a good night's sleep in weeks. And somehow, in some other aspects, he looked more relaxed than usual. She wasn't sure about what it was that gave her that impression, but she felt like Lincoln wasn't worried anymore about the small things that usually bothered him. Like the fact that his friends were teasing him for being with her, or that he had suggested to sit next to the fountain and not on a bench. The people passing by frowned at them, like it was something gross to eat there. But Lincoln, a boy who was usually very worried about things like that, seemed totally oblivious. It was like he didn't even care for what other people would think of him anymore. Something was wrong, and Ronnie Ann was determined to find out what it was. Look, I'm having a blast here with you, but I can see something's bothering you. Are you going to tell me, or do we have to keep pretending it's nothing? Lincoln slowly and silently nodded, more to himself than for her. He had his eyes staring at the floor, thoughtfully. "Lincoln," she said, seeing how weak he suddenly seemed to be. "Are you okay?" He looked up, right at her. They were sitting next to each other, only separated by the burger bags. Ronnie Ann stared at his eyes. Even though they were in a crowded place, the moment their eyes met they were transported to another dimension. A place where there was only them. A place where the background music, the buzz of the people, and the announcements on the speakers could not be heard over the sound of their hearts beating fast. He took a deep breath and then gently put his hand over Ronnie Ann's. She didn't say anything, just kept staring at his eyes. She didn't flinch when he leaned an inch closer. She just held her breath, waiting, and that's all he needed to make up his mind. Leaning in a somewhat quick and clumsy way, Lincoln closed the distance that separated them, and he put his lips over hers. They both closed their eyes shut, fearing that if they opened them, the magic of the moment would disappear. He had barely tilted his head, so their noses were slightly touching. None of them were breathing, and they only had their lips firmly pressed against the others. Both Lincoln and Ronnie Ann knew, in theory, how to kiss like a grown-up. They knew their lips should be moving a lot more, and that they would normally open their mouths to give some room for the other person's tongue. But they had seen their siblings kissing before, and they thought it was something completely gross. They were 11. For them, just pressing their lips together was an incredible adventure. When they ran out of air, they finally broke the kiss. They stared at each other for a few seconds, and they were soon utterly embarrassed. They both sat staring at the front with their arms at their sides. They were as still as statues. I'm sorry," Lincoln said, not daring to look at her, "for not asking you." "You never asked me before," she remembered him. Lincoln let out a chuckle, seeing that she was right. "But this was different," she continued, relaxing her shoulders a little. "The first time you kissed me was because your sisters told me that I liked you and you wanted to keep me from kicking your butt." "Well, in retrospective, in that time in John Juan's," she interrupted him, "you kissed me in front of everyone because you had been really rude to me and you didn't want your sister Lori to kill you." "What? No, not the moment I truly felt—" "You always had a reason to kiss me," she said, not letting him finish once again. "But not this time. Why did you kiss me?" Lincoln finally turned his head to see her. "I don't know," he honestly said, trying to think about what had made him take the initiative to kiss her. "I just felt like I wanted to." "Are you angry with me?" "No, not really," she admitted. Lincoln managed to relax a little after hearing that at least he hadn't made her angry. Ronnie Ann, meanwhile, was getting more flustered by the second. In some ways, she really liked this new Lincoln. One so secure and sure about himself, that would take the initiative. It was so different than the rather shy and even slow guy she knew he'd get a beat at sometimes. But she couldn't help but feel like there was something wrong with the whole situation. "So, I heard you were in the hospital," she said. Lincoln's smile disappeared. "Yeah, I know." "You know? Your sister Lucy told you?" she worriedly asked, fearing that the little girl might have said something she shouldn't have. "Lucy?" he asked, confused. "No, Lori told Bobby, and he must have told you about it." Ronnie Ann gave her a facepalm. "Of course, Bobby." "Spoke with Lucy?" "Well, yeah, on Monday at school. I wanted to know what happened to you, and she told me you were still in the hospital. She told me you were fine." "Oh, I see." She considered telling him that she had stopped a guy from bullying his little sister, but in the end she didn't think it was necessary to do so. She was sure that the bully wouldn't bother Lucy again, so there was no reason to worry Lincoln about nothing. Certainly she didn't want to talk about how dead worried she had been about him. She regretted to have mentioned the meeting. "You know," she thought, "I hated you, but because of the punch I gave you when you kissed me in front of your house," she remembered. Lincoln smiled. "She was probably messing with you. She gets happy every time she finds out we're meeting. Remember that time I ducked you so she wouldn't invite you to the Sadie Hawkins dance? She got me a date in so I wouldn't feel bummed out. Really? Ronnie Ann asked, confused. But she was talking like she really thought I was like some kind of bully. I'm not pretending to understand Lucy's motives. I don't know why she'd do that. Maybe she wanted to see your reaction. I don't know. But she's fully aware of our relationship. That word echoed inside Ronnie Ann's mind, and she felt her heart beating faster after hearing it. Relationship. It can mean a lot of stuff. There were friendly relationships, family relationships, even work relationships. But in that context, applied to both of them, the word had another meaning, another dimension. She didn't know how to define it, though. They weren't just friends. That was clear. Their relationship was beyond a normal friendship. It was something deeper. She didn't know what it was, but she loved it. They were comfortable enough with each other to be their real selves, to talk about their likes and their hobbies, knowing they wouldn't be judged. They could hang out in the arcade and play for hours, or they could go to the park, walking by the old bridge that went across a small stream, talking about ghosts, their favorite bands, what they wanted to be when they were older, the movie they had seen last night, or whatever they wanted to talk about. His messages were the only ones she always waited to read in the night, and just by seeing a notification from Lamo, she would be happy. They were clearly not just friends. But what were they? They weren't a couple because none of them had officially asked the other about it. If Lincoln asked her to be his girlfriend, she knows she'd say yes. But that's not what she wanted. They were only 11 years old. They weren't ready to take the things to the next step. She knew how a relationship could change people. At least she knew how it changed Bobby. Being in a relationship brings along a lot of restrictions that would tie them up. They'd have to answer every single text they sent to each other. They'd have to be romantic. They had to meet as much as possible. In school, they wouldn't be able to hang out with their friends. They'd have to be with each other so everyone knew they were an item. If they were in a relationship, Lincoln could no longer talk with other girls, and she couldn't talk with other boys anymore because they might get jealous, or people would start spreading gossip, and gossip could destroy a couple. She didn't want any of that. She didn't want to lose everything that made his relationship with Lincoln special. Why change something that was working out so great? Something that just felt right. If they were both happy, why not stay that way? They were kids. They could be together when they were older. Ronnie Ann? She got out of her trance when she called her. She looked at him and noticed that he appeared to be really nervous. Look, I've got something to tell you. Something important, he said, looking at her with a mixture of seriousness and sadness. All right, Ronnie, don't panic, she told herself in her mind. It's Lincoln. He won't be asking you to be his girlfriend just like that. There's nothing to be afraid of. I like you. I really do. That's why I don't want to keep hiding this from you. I need to tell you. Okay, you can panic now. He's gonna tell you he loves you. It's something pretty recent. Pretty much no one knows this. Only my older sisters and Clyde know. It makes sense. He must have asked his sister for help, and Clyde's his best friend. Bobby also knows about this, but don't be mad with him. I asked him to not tell you anything because I wanted to tell you personally. Bobby? Why would Lincoln talk about this with Bobby? Lincoln grabbed Ronnie Ann's hand and took a deep breath, preparing himself to say whatever he wanted to take out of his chest. Ronnie Ann was almost dying from her nerves. She wasn't ready for this, for Lincoln to declare his love for her. She didn't want to ruin their relationship forever, because if he told her that he loved her, there would only be two options. To say that she didn't feel the same, which would be a lie, and would ruin their relationship. Or to say that she loved him, too. Be his girlfriend. and then lose the magic of their no-strings-attached relationship. She wasn't ready for neither option. But Lincoln was a smart and understanding guy. He would always listen to her. Maybe if she explained to him what she felt about him and their special relationship, he would understand. Maybe that was her chance of a third option. That's why, when Lincoln started to speak, she spoke over him. Ronnie Ann, Ronnie Ann, I've only got 2 weeks left. Let me tell you something first. Lincoln opened his eyes, astonished. Sure, he said, not knowing how to react. She gently squeezed his hand and looked at him with a hint of sadness in her eyes. Look, I like you too, okay? She admitted, profoundly blushing. Like, really, really like you. It was the first time in his life that she was admitting her feelings so openly, and she felt really flustered, even more than she was willing to admit. Lincoln, meanwhile, was blushing too. I'm glad to hear that, but that's not what I'm... Listen, I get you. I know what you're gonna say, and I feel the same way. Ronnie Ann, I don't think we're on the same page, but I really like this thing we have right now, and I don't want it to change, to lose its magic. I don't want you to feel bad, but I don't think I'm ready to be your girlfriend. Whoa, 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 stop right there, Lincoln said, his face as red as a tomato, gesticulating with her hands to stop Ronnie Ann. I'm not asking you to be my girlfriend. Lincoln's voice was full of sadness and impotence, but Ronnie Ann misread it. She was convinced that he was about to tell her how much he really loved her, and she would have to painfully explain to him that she would rather stay the way they were. But hearing him say this so eloquently that he wasn't going to ask her that, she suddenly felt sad. You're not? She asked, feeling a cold hand gripping her heart. No, it wasn't that. I mean, it's not that I don't want you to be my girlfriend. I like that, but I can't. I can't ask you to be my girlfriend. Not now. After what? She asked, feeling worse with every word he said. What did he mean he couldn't ask her? What was he talking about? What was going on? Lincoln opened his mouth to answer her, but a voice distracted them. Lincoln! They both looked in the direction the voice had come. Dodging the people carrying the mall bags, a girl their age was running right at them. She was wearing a navy blue blouse and skirt, and her curly auburn hair was being held in place by an orange hairband. She approached them until she was just a few meters away from the fountain, but she stopped dead in her tracks when she saw Ronnie Ann. They both instantly recognized her, and they couldn't hide their surprise in their voices when they pronounced her name.